Hey everyone, it's Noah Barnett, the VP of Marketing here at Feathr, and today in the studio, as always, I'm joined by Nhu. Hey Nhu, it's our last time in the studio this year.
Oh, it's bittersweet, but happy holidays. It's a fun and energetic time of the year.
Absolutely, happy holidays to you as well. What do holidays look
Thank
like in your household during this season?
you. Well, we have kind of like a dual cultural thing happening in our house. So my husband is Jewish, so we celebrated Hanukkah last week, which I really enjoyed. It's just like good food. I love lighting the candles and bringing light into the house. And it was our son's first Hanukkah, so that was fun. And then, next week, or maybe the end of this week, we celebrate Christmas with my family. So my son doesn't really know what's going on because he's only 10 months old, but there's a lot of gift exchanging happening between mommy and daddy and him. He enjoys all the toys and books he's getting, but I don't think it's really registering yet. So next year should be really fun. How about you?
Yeah, no, I feel like from the kids' experience, they're like, what changed? They're like, I got one toy every once in a while, and now all of a sudden I'm getting flooded with them. And then next week it goes back to nothing. And they're like, what did I do?
What's
Because
happening?
as a kid, sub one, you're like, the world revolves around you. And so you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
was it my birthday again? I'm not sure. So
Like, what did I
I'll
do to
be
deserve
excited to
this?
see how they respond after the holidays of their first holiday, where they're
Mm-hmm.
like, are we going to get
Absolutely.
more of those gifts? Is this like an ongoing thing or not? My
Yeah.
kids are a little bit older than that, and so there's a lot of anticipation.
Mm-hmm.
We my partner is very diligent around wrapping gifts as they come, and so gifts slowly pile up under the tree leading up
Nice,
till
nice.
Christmas when we open them. Because my
Mm-hmm.
youngest is almost 8 and then my oldest is 13, so it's a different type of holiday, but there's still a lot of anticipation and excitement. I think the thing I'm most excited about is the week after the holiday. We're going snowboarding, and that's kind of started to becoming a family
Oh,
tradition where we
nice.
go do like snow
Yeah.
sports stuff. We live in Phoenix, so snow is
Mm-hmm.
accessible, but you have to drive somewhere to go to it. But doing that in and
Right.
around the
Yeah.
holidays is always fun.
And that's so fun. I love snowboarding. I haven't gone in years, but I used to enjoy it a lot. It was just really fun. And at the end of the day, you get a waffle. It's just very rewarding.
A waffle? Why specifically a
Yeah.
waffle,
Oh,
or is that just
you guys, you guys don't do that. So the ski resorts up north, I guess like a few hours from us, they have like a waffle stand, and it's like a hot waffle that they serve you, and you can get like
hmm,
chocolate on it, or caramel, and it's just tasty.
that's
Maybe
cool.
it's an
That's
East Coast
exciting.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My boys love waffles, so maybe we'll have to try that out and see if there's like a waffle station at the ski resort.
Yeah, you should. It's a
Yeah,
nice treat.
that'd be great. Well, as we head into the holidays and the end of year, obviously end of year fundraising, even if you're not a
Mhm.
fundraising organization, like the end of year just always feels busy and there's a lot of activities going on, um, both outside of work, but also inside of work. And
Mhm.
the topic for this week's brief, the Good Marketing Brief, if you're not familiar with that, that's a weekly newsletter we send out every week, and Nhu helps us curate. We drop it in everyone's inboxes on Wednesdays and then record this compliment on Fridays. But this week's topic was retention. And typically that's not a topic
Mhm.
you maybe associate with year ends where you're talking about retention.
Yep.
But why did you choose this topic right now?
Yeah, I love talking about retention at the end of the year. I think it kind of falls by the wayside sometimes in the midst of all the crazy campaign planning and making sure you're hitting your goals. But even if you aren't like pushing out a really robust year-end campaign, by the nature of the holiday season, you're probably going to get an influx of gifts and new supporters coming through your door. And so I just think it's an opportunity as your new donor file is growing and you have all these new names, you don't want them to just fall off your list and, forget about you. So I think it's a good time for nonprofits as they go into the new year to find ways to continue to engage their supporters, connect with them, build a relationship with them so that their support goes from one time to, recurring.
Absolutely. And retention is always one of these topics that we say is important. And then every year when we do our annual State of Nonprofit Marketing report, everyone always puts acquisition as more important than retention, just by choice, not by
Absolutely.
exclusion, but they say, hey, yeah, I'm really focused on acquisition this year. And then at the end of the year or towards the end of the year, middle of the year, we're always like, man, retention, we really need to focus on that. Someone said something last week in a panel discussion was the best approach to acquisition is to focus on retention. And I couldn't more wholeheartedly agree with that because it's so important. But in this week's brief, you kind of curated a bunch of resources as to why retention should be a top priority for nonprofits and some practical tips.
Yeah.
What was some of the things
Absolutely.
that surfaced in the brief?
Yeah, I think retention sometimes or a lot of times falls behind acquisition. But continuing to spend money to acquire more donors is harder, right? You're trying to convince new people to support your cause and why it's important. Whereas if you invest more of that time and resources into retaining the ones who have already given to you, have already shown an interest in your mission and a connection to it, I think it's just more sustainable in the long term. And so I'm going to bring up Tobes again because I feel like every time I'm putting together the brief, I get his newsletter on Sunday and I'm like, oh, there's a topic here that aligns with our brief. So let's dive in. And he really talks about how to increase retention and donor lifetime value. Because if you retain a donor, they give several times in the course of their lifetime value obviously goes up. And so in his newsletter this week, he really dives into a retention marketing toolkit. And there's a lot of useful information in there, but it really is more than just checking off a few boxes and being like, hey, I sent a thank you letter. I sent an acknowledgement letter. I sent a couple of hey, this is your impact and continue supporting our cause. It should be a more robust strategy that focuses on marketing channels, doing donor surveys to see what's really resonating with donors or supporters and what's not, looking at your analytics, and of course, investing in donor experiences.
Yeah. And so many of those things are essential. And I think we say that we're prioritizing them, but I appreciate the increased lens of, well, how do we invest in these because it's contribution to retention versus just focusing on the activities, anchoring the activities to the outcome of retention, even in something as simple as a survey. We're surveying people to get information, but by asking people's opinions and getting feedback, those that respond to the survey, according to some research by the agitator or donor voice, says that people that respond to surveys are more likely to give to you again. And so it's already an indication by them actually completing the survey that they have a higher propensity to possibly give to you. And so even thinking through when someone fills out the survey, what does our cultivation strategy look like next to continue that momentum going? Not to immediately say, thanks for filling out the survey. Now you can give a gift or become a monthly donor. But in the next 30 days or 45 days, because they did filled out survey, how are we cultivating them to more deeply connect? Because they've already told you that they are invested or they wouldn't have filled out a survey. And I think it's so practical to anchor those tactics to the outcome of retention.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point with the donor surveys. The survey in general, it could take a minute or two, but getting to someone to actually click the link and take the time out of their day to fill out a survey is difficult, right? Unless you have something that incentivizes them, like a gift. You've seen it in the for-profit space, a gift card or a free giveaway for an iPad or whatever it is. Without that tangible incentive, it's difficult. So if a donor is filling out your donor survey just because they want to, it means they are committed to your cause. And I think it's a great point that you pointed out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also included a great guide from some friends over at Neon One on how you can specifically retain end of year donors. So obviously right now we're in the midst of capturing end of year donors. But I think it's the
Mhm.
right time to be thinking about, okay, people are going to give to my end of year campaigns. What am I going to do in the next 30, 60, 90 days, January,
Yeah.
February, March, to retain them? And this guide had some practical tips. Anything that stood out to you
Yeah.
that was maybe more relevant for our listeners to focus in on?
Mhm. Absolutely. I like this guide. Abby is the content lead over at Neon One, and she compiled this pretty comprehensive guide specifically for year-end donors. And there's some good tips in there, but I mean the key overarching theme here is don't make it transactional. Don't focus on just the donation or the money that you received from a donor. Really focus on the person and address them as a person and not thanks for your donation. You should address them as like, hey, thank you for your contribution to our cause. And then invite them to continue supporting outside of outside of a financial ask, whether it's spreading the word, attending an upcoming event, starting their own fundraiser, signing up to be a member or a monthly supporter. I think these are all things to keep in mind. And she also ends it to kind of make nonprofits' lives easier. They have like a series of thank you templates that nonprofits can use to kind of cultivate and retain donors.
Yeah. The next resource you shared in the brief this week talked about retention strategies through the lens of donor diversification. That one stood out to me
Mm-hmm.
as an interesting thing because, again, it's like, there's the practical tips of thank your
Mm-hmm.
donors, which the Neon Guide provides a bunch of great tips on.
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledge your donors as they are, really connect them to the impact. Then there's Tobes, which is like, hey, there's some activities you can do that tie back to retention if you anchor them through this lens. This one felt completely different because it was like, hey, by prioritizing diversification within your donor base, that can actually contribute or be an indicator of better retention rates. Can you kind of unpack maybe what
Mm-hmm.
you heard in this article that would be relevant as people plan for 2024?
Yeah, and this goes beyond 2024, right? Kind of expanding the types of donors that are on your file is key for the longevity and the long-term health of your nonprofit. In this article in particular, it talks about, you know, diversifying the different generations of donors that you're that are on your file. And I mean, we've all heard that we're in the middle of a great wealth transfer, and there's $84 trillion in flux right now that are getting passed from older donors, the silent generation, baby boomers, to millennials and Gen Z as well. And so with that, more forward-thinking nonprofits are already, expanding their fundraising strategies to engage the younger donors. And I think for nonprofits, it can be tough to figure out what messaging resonates for every type of donor, right? But it's really about tailoring your messaging. We've talked about it here. I know Feathr has a bunch of resources on segmentation and how to create these groups of donors and target messaging based on their preferences, their behaviors, and their passions. And so really leaning into that. At the end of the day, you want to share your stories. Those are your most valuable resources because people care about stories, right? They want to feel good. They want to feel like they can help somebody who needs it. And so highlighting those, sharing the impact, segmenting, finding what values donors have and really speaking to those. And of course, testing all of your efforts to make sure that it's actually working.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think this goes back to a theme we've covered in the Good Marketing Brief constantly. And it's actually the first part or first
Mm-hmm.
step of the good marketing framework is you have to understand your audience. And by understanding your audience, you're able to better cultivate connections and then activate action. And so this is another great reminder that
Mm-hmm.
as we diversify, different things change, and being sensitive to the diversification of your donor base as you think about retention strategies. The one thing I love about the Good Marketing Brief and Nhu, you always drop these, like, I was going to say Easter eggs, but maybe Christmas gifts or holiday presents or whatever you want to say into the brief, where we can learn something from for-profit brands or these big brands and apply it to nonprofits. And this week you chose to include Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut's like this legacy brand. I haven't actually thought about Pizza Hut in a really long time, but what can nonprofits learn from Pizza Hut's holiday marketing campaign?
Yeah, this one is a good one because it's really about giving back to the community. And so, what Pizza Hut did is they launched this campaign. They sent out these doormats to customers on like a first come, first serve basis so that they can display it throughout the holiday season. And as a way to give back to the delivery drivers, and this is goes beyond just the pizza delivery drivers from Pizza Hut, but like any type of delivery, whether it's like post person or USPS, FedEx, as they're dropping off a package and see the doormat, they can scan the code and get a Pizza Hut gift card. So I think it's just a fun way to get the community engaged and give back to those who, you want to show support for. And so I think that for nonprofits, one, on the tech side, QR codes, they still are useful after the pandemic. I know they're used widely when we couldn't really interact with each other, but finding ways to integrate that into your fundraising, whether it's at an in-person event or it's like a direct mail. I actually read a study from Giving USA that I think for younger donors, 50% of them will scan a QR code on a direct mail appeal. So I think that's useful. On the other hand, I think this shows that people care about supporting their communities and wanting to give back. So finding ways to make that connection between donors and your mission, I think, is going to be helpful.
Yeah. And I think there's a subtleness here that we've talked about in previous good marketing briefs, where giving your supporters, or in this part, your community, something to socially identify as part of the community, as a do-gooder or as a good give backer, whether it's something symbiotic or symbolic, not symbiotic, but symbolic, like even a token, or like when we wear a brand that gives back and it has something on it, like it says something about who we are or who we want to be. And even something as simple here, where it's like they have a doormat that gives back to delivery drivers, like that's still communicating a sense of identity. And I think that's a big part of good marketing, is creating that identity and connection. And it can be done through small tokens or through large scale things like a doormat in this case. And so thinking through how do you drive identity and community and connection in a socially visible way. Jonah Berger talks about this a lot, is you want to give people the ability to show off that they're a part of it. That's why like the white Apple headphones wanted to be intentionally different than other things, because it's like you're in a different group. Or the Bose headphones or the Beats, it's like you're in a different category, and that needs to be communicated visually. And this was another way to do that. So lots to learn as we head into that. Any final thoughts as we close out our last good marketing brief for the year, at least here in the studio? Any kind of practical tips as people close out their 2023s and step into 24?
Yeah, I think that this is first a critical time to take your rest, recharge for the new year, because, I know nonprofits especially are crunched for time between September and December. There's just a lot to do, very little time. And as, the year-end campaigns are finally just in motion, taking advantage of the time to, unwind, spend time with loved ones, and really celebrate the holidays. But, as the new year approaches, I know I dropped this podcast from We Are for Good in the inspiration section. Leah, who is the Senior Director of Strategy and Innovation at George Mason University, she hops on with John and Becky just to talk about like innovation and breaking down the walls of the for-profit and the nonprofit space. And I think innovation is thrown out a lot, and it's really, what does that mean for nonprofits? And it's really just challenging nonprofits to think outside of the norm of what has traditionally been done, and trying new things. She shared a kind of framework from Pixar, which was for their staff. What Pixar does is they tell their staff to give very honest and brutal feedback so that they can create the best product possible. And I think it's a good way for nonprofits, like it's a good framework for nonprofits to adapt or to try out in the new year so that, one, you're being inclusive to all the members on your team and make sure all ideas are heard, but also ensuring that what you're doing is resonating with everybody on the team because, everyone is the face of your organization. So having everyone aligned is going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think rest, innovation, all key themes. I think the third one I would add to that list is just focus. You can only do so much before the end of the year. You can only do so much even in January when we have the whole year ahead of us. And so as I always share with my team, focus always wins. I need to hear that often. I think we all probably could hear that more often and heed that advice. So innovate, rest, and focus as we close out. Nhu, it's been a pleasure spending so much time with you in the studio this year. And thank you so much for your curation of the Good Marketing Brief. Again, if you're interested in learning more about this, feel free to click the link below and you can get it in your inbox. And next week we'll be on holiday, but you'll still get a Good Marketing Brief in your inbox on Wednesday. And then we'll be back with you in the new year. Thanks so much, Nhu, and enjoy your holiday.
Happy holidays, everybody.